Hey guys, so welcome to my Lightroom. I'm here to show you a specific shoot I did here. It was the middle of the day, and so that means the sun was bright in the sky and there were no clouds, so I just want to show you that you can shoot in the middle of the day without shade. Now, I will say these two things. My subject wore a hat, which I gave her, so that helped a lot. I suggest that, using something unless you really want to play with shadows, because it evens out the light on her face. Also, I think it's easier to shoot in difficult lighting situations when you have one or two people and you have more control over the situation than if you're going to do like family portraits or something. Because I could tell my subject exactly what I wanted her to do, and it was easier to shoot that way. So how I started this off was previously, before the shoot, I had done another harsh light shoot, and I did a completely different approach, but I remember the presets I used were really good for harsh light. So let's see. I used this preset. I think it was this one. No, this one. I started with this preset because I knew I used it in harsh light previously, and then I tweaked it to fit this shoot correctly, which ultimately ended up looking like this. So I'm just going to go through the panel over here and show you like a little bit of everything I did, so you can get an idea of like why I edited the way I did, and I'll go through some of the photos in here as well. So after I put the preset on, I adjusted everything in here first, and what I typically do is sometimes these, like my highlights are way higher, my whites are really high or low. It really depends on the light. But something that I always typically do is I keep my blacks higher than my shadows. Because if I put my shadow here and my black here, then it just looks a little too like high def for me, which is a little busy. I like it to look softer. So you can already see there's less detail in the shadows, which I kind of like. And then I usually keep my clarity between 5 and 10, and usually always keep my saturation lower than my vibrance. That's because when you put your saturation up, even if your vibrance is low, the skin tones and the oranges and yellows get like super bright, which we don't need that. And then on the curves, because this is in harsh light, I flatten my highlights here and my shadows here, and it takes the two extremes of exposures, like here and then like here or so. It just kind of makes them less extreme. So, and it also evens the sky out and makes this area softer. So if I'm going to move this up like that, like you can already see the difference that makes. And then if I'm going to take my shadows down, it really changes the way it looks. So that's the sweet spot I found there. And then I do play with the red and green curves. Typically what I do is I'll pull my red down a little bit. So usually it like starts somewhere in here. I'll pull it down a little bit, and then the shadows might get a little cyan. So then I take the green and I pull it down just to add a little bit of magenta back. But I also play with the red highlight. I like to get a blue tint sometimes. I try to avoid pink tints because it's just not my style. So I play with the curves a lot, but I'll do a different video way more in depth with that. I didn't use the curve too much with this shoot, mainly just the shadows and highlights. Now this part's really important, especially for this shoot, because I wanted the sky to still show. And in this particular photo, the sky is still a little overexposed, but we shot in the middle of the day, so you can only do so much. I tend to keep my blues and aquas over in the negative area because I would rather have them be more green than purple. And then I decrease my luminance so that you can actually see the sky, because luminance controls the brightness. So you can see the difference here. And then I increased my blues enough to where it didn't look like super crazy. Then on highlights and shadows, this is split toning, and I love split toning because it really changes the mood of a photo. So sometimes I add shadow warmth in. I do that a lot, but in these I didn't do it as much because the photo was already so warm that I didn't really need to add more warmth in the shadows except for the close-up portraits. But the ones where she's further back, I just changed the highlights. So you can see the difference that makes. That is insane, but you get the idea. I add usually warm and warm together because it creates a soft look, which I like more. But if you want to add contrast, something you can do is add a cool highlight and a warm shadow, which can look really folksy and good with nature photos a lot of the time. And that does add, it's more of like you're adding contrast because you have opposite tones. If you want a typical cross-process look, you do blue shadows and yellow highlights. And that's a little bit more high fashion, but it's kind of like, to me, it just feels a little like traditional. And I don't really like that. So anyway, going down to calibration. So I typically don't have my reds this high, and I usually have my blues higher. Like this, which I still like the way that looks. But I decided to keep the reds high, and then the green I usually don't do too much of because see how her skin got super like saturated looking. The blue I play with the most out of any of these because sometimes I like to desaturate the blue for a really nice muted tone, or if I want the subject to look a little more glowy, I increase it. See how that just kind of like brightens the whole thing up? I love it. It's so pretty. And I felt like this was a good balance between these three. And then the part that I really want to show you that I love to do is the radial filters. Okay, I know this looks crazy on the radial filters, but it's so worth it. So I have all these little dots here, and these are filters. So if I click on one, and then I click Show Selected Mask Area down here, you'll see the area that is affected by the filter. So let me show you what it looks like before the radial filter. It doesn't make a big difference on this photo. But this is inside of my preset, so it doesn't take a lot of work. And then I just adjust the preset as needed. So what I do with these is I dodge and burn. Let me go to a photo where it really makes a difference, and then you can see what I mean. Let's see, here we go. This one is in the blog that I'm writing. Now this is before the radial filter, which is still a nice look, but it's super high def looking to me, where it's like everything is too detailed, and I like it to have a bit of a softer look. So this is what I did. We're gonna start with this radial filter right here. So this filter is just bringing a bit of brightness back into her eyes because the shadow from her hat. And what I did was I upped the whites for contrast and then the exposure to add in some of that light back. But then it kind of washed out like her eyebrows and eyes, so I lowered the blacks a little bit. And then here, I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit. Okay, so this filter is really just so I can bring that sky back in because it is, let me delete it and show you the difference. So there's a lot of blown out areas right here. That filter kind of just brings some of that back in because I underexposed. But then because the exposure, let me get back to it. The exposure is so dark that I upped the highlights and then my shadows and, well, the highlights and shadows to bring like some of the detail back, because without that, it would be like super dark and obvious that she has a vignette around her. Vignette, I don't know. And then because that can get really harsh looking, see that's like super harsh, I raise my blacks to soften it, because like when you do see the difference between this, so I just manipulate little tools here to balance. It's really just balancing everything out. And then what I typically do is I underexpose on the outside, and then I bring some of that light back in to the subject. So on this one here, oops, I brought exposure and highlights in, and then I brought the blacks up and the shadows down a little bit. I could have done this too, where I raised the shadows and lowered the blacks, but that really darkened her face. So I tend to like to lower shadows and then expose other areas because it creates like a nice soft contrast. Okay, so overall, I just took you through a really quick process of the editing panel. I know I didn't get super specific with everything, and that editing is super subjective, so every shoot it can change just a little bit. I will get more specific. I have a radial filter one, a little video coming up on how I use radial filters in a shoot where it mattered way more, and the difference between my dodging and burning with my filters is actually like super noticeable, unlike this shoot. So I just wanted to take you through a basic rundown of what I do, but I'll do more specific things like retouching or using the colors and split toning in extreme ways where you can really see a lot more than just a basic like running through the panel. If you have any questions over this, let me know, or ever really, and go to my blog and write a comment or my IGTV or anything like that, so I know like what you're interested in learning or listening, or if you have any advice for me, I'd love to hear it. But thank you for listening. Hopefully that like my editing videos and vlogs and what I talk about is helpful to someone. That would be awesome. So, all right, just let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.